Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share, a Gmar Chasimah Tova to everyone. I'm recording this on Tzem Gedalia, the day after Rosh Hashanah. Today's learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Meir ben Chayesara, who is in need of Rachamei Shamayim. So I hope everyone had a wonderful Yom Tov. It's good to be starting off a new year on the right foot with some limud Torah. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis. We're continuing to learn tevilas yadayim, and we pick up today on Nun Aleph Amid Beis, 2 lines off the bottom, Siman Kuf Nun Tes Sif Yud Daled. Now, I said that we are continuing to learn tevilas yadayim. The truth is that the last several days, and while I'm speaking, I'm just going to make a quick adjustment to my computer over here. Not sure how it comes up on the screen, but I'm just fixing that annoying losing focus problem that happens every time I turn off my computer and turn it back on again. In any case, the last few days we haven't really been speaking about tevilas yadayim. We've been speaking more about tevilas yadayim. Tevilas yadayim is when we wash our hands from a keli. Tevilas yadayim is when we immerse our hands. There we go. We immerse our hands in a body of water to accomplish taharas yadayim instead of washing from a keli, and that's really going to be the continuing theme for today's shir. So, Sif Yodalid, Nun Aleph Amid Beis, 2 lines off the bottom near the end of the line, says the Mechaber. Hitbil Yadav b'mei ma'ayon. If somebody immerses his hands into the waters of a spring. Now, a mayon means a natural spring. It's water that's issuing forth from the ground. But like the Mishnah Berurah says over here, a nice cut Nayin Zayin, b'mei mayon, when we speak about mei mayon in the context of these halachas, hainu b'chol mei mois hanoivin, we're talking about any kind of flowing water, even if they are waters that are flowing very, very far, or they're water where the source is very, very, very far away, and I'm dunking my hands into this running water maybe 5 miles away from the source. So this really could be any river, a stream, a creek, but it's a natural body of flowing water. So again, says the Mechaber, Hitbil Yadav b'mei mayon, if you immerse your hands into the waters of a flowing spring, afilu ein bay arba imsa, even if at the point where you immerse your hands, you do not have a body of water of 40 sa, you have less than that in volume. Also like tefillah, this accomplishes tevilas yadayim, that tefillah would be effective. Kol shebiskasid yadav bahem bebas achas. So long as you're immersing your hands in enough water, where there's enough water that you could dunk both of your hands at the same time, and the water will cover your hands. Now, that's the way the Mishnah Berurah learns this. We'll talk about a Chazon Ish a little bit later on. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah back on Nun Aleph Amid Beis, Ois Katan Ayin Ches. Afilu ein boy. The Mechaber said that you could accomplish tevilas yadayim in the water of a flowing spring, even if you do not have 40 sa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the barbam sa pshita de bahani afilu b'shar meimoy she'enam noivin. If you have arba'im sa, then you don't need flowing water. Flowing water is a maila. Flowing water, it's easier to accomplish to tevilas yadayim using flowing water. Mei ma'ayin brings on tahara quickly than mayim mechunasim, more so than stayed water that's standing in one place. The Mechaber is telling you over here that by a mei mayin you don't need arba'im sa. By standing water, by mayim mechunasim, you need, well, we'll see, it's a machlokes whether or not you need 40 sa or not. So again, arba'im sa, if we had 40 sa, pshita de bahani afilu b'shar meimoy she'enam noivim, 40 sa or more would work even if it was not mei mayon, even if it wasn't flowing water. Over here, we're talking about flowing water. Now, what's the minimum amount of water that you need? So the Mechaber said, it has to be enough, kol shemiskasin yadav bahem bebas achas, enough that you could cover both of your hands at one time. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katnayin Test Kol Shemiskasin Ukamayl Inyan Tevilas Kalim. This is similar to the halacha of Tevilas Kalim, the Kaimalad where we paskin the Mayon Mitar B'Kol Shehu, that flowing water could accomplish Tevilas Kalim. It could be Mitar Kalim, even a Kol Shehu, even a tiny amount of water. Kol Shemiskasin Boy, so long as you have enough water to cover the keli that you're trying to tevel. So, for example, if somebody wanted to tevel a tiny cup the size of a thimble, so as long as you have enough water that you could dunk the entire thimble, and the entire thimble would be covered by the water, that would accomplish Tevilas Kalim. So, that's the halacha by Tevilas Kalim. Even the most minute amount of water, as long as it can cover what you're trying to tevel. So over here, you're trying to be tevel your hands. How much water do you need? You need enough water that it could cover your hands. If this works by Tevilas Kalim, which is a daraisa, certainly it works by netilas yadayim or tevilas yadayim, which is only a darabanan. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, "V'gam de betfilas haguf nami lekama paiskim ein tzarich b'mayin arba'am sadafka." The truth is that even when it comes to tfilas kol haguf, even somebody who's tamei and is going to the mikveh in order to be metaher his entire body, the truth is, says the Mishnah Berurah, even by tfilas haguf, there are many paiskim that hold that if you're being tevel in a mayon, if you're being tevel in flowing water, as opposed to a mikveh, as opposed to standing water, many poskim hold that if you're teveling yourself in flowing water, you don't need arba hamsa. How much do you need? Ela kishir sheyiskasa gufay shel kaladam lefi mashahu. You need only the amount of water necessary to cover your body. V'aftaloi kaimalon kain, even though we don't pass it that way, I'll call panim netilas yadayim yesh lahakel. When it comes to netilas yadayim, which is only a din derabanan, we could be mekel. Ois cut and pay, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mechaber said you need enough water. The words of the Mechaber were kol shemiskasin yadav bahem, enough water that you could cover yadav, which is a lashon rabim, your hands, in the water. Babasakas at one time. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut and pay. V'afte kosher l'toivlan achas achas. Even though you don't need to dunk both hands at one time in order to accomplish tevilas yadayim, the same way you wash netilas yadayim and you wash one hand first and then you wash the other, if you're doing tevilas yadayim, you could dunk one hand and then dunk the second hand. You're not required to dunk both hands at the same time. Now, the Mechaber, at least the way the Mishnah Berurah understands the Mechaber is saying over here, how much water do you need? You're dunking your hands in Mei Ma'ayan. How much flowing water do you need over here to dunk your hands so that you should be able to accomplish tevilas yadayim? You need enough water that theoretically you would be able to put both your hands into the water and cover both hands. If you only have enough water to cover one hand, it's not good for tevilas yadayim, even though you're only going to wash one at a time. So says the Mishnah Berurah, after kashal l'toivlan achas achas, even though your halacha, you could dunk one hand at a time, you don't have to dunk both at the same time, still, shir hamayim, the amount of water that you need, you have to have enough water that you should be able to dunk both hands at the same time. Now the Chazon Ish happens to be, does not learn the Mechaber like the Chavetz Chaim. The Chazon Ish learns, Kol shebiskasin yodav bahem bebasakas means enough water that you could dunk one hand. And what does babasachas mean? You see, the Chavetz Chaim is coming from the words babasachas. Kol shebiskasin yodav bahem babasachas. Sounds like the Mechaber is saying, enough that you could dunk both hands babasachas at the same time. The Chazon Ish doesn't learn that way. The Chazon Ish learns kol shemiskasin yodav bahem babasachas, enough water that you could dunk one hand and cover the entire hand in water bebasakas at one time. Not that you have to stick in half your hand and then stick in the other half of your hand. It has to be enough water to cover one entire hand babasachas. That's the way the Chazon Ish learns. But this is a Mishnah Berurah shared. That's not the way the Chafetz Chaim learns. Again, the Chafetz Chaim learns the minimum amount of water that you have to have is enough water to cover both hands at the same time. So far over here in Sif Yodalid, we're talking about the halacha of somebody he's trying to accomplish tevilas yadayim in mei mayon, in flowing water. Flowing water, said the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, flowing water, you don't need arboim sa. Everybody knows the minimum share for a mikveh is arboim sa. Flowing water, you don't need arboim sa. You just need enough water that you could dunk both hands at the same time and cover them completely. That would be enough water to accomplish tevilas yadayim. Do you need to dunk both hands at the same time? No. You could dunk one hand, then you could dunk the other hand. Where does this come from? That you don't need arba sa? Where does this shear come from? That it's enough just to have enough water to cover what you're trying to be tevel, which is your hands. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it comes from the halakha of tevilas kelim. By tevilas kelim, you want to be tevel a tiny cup. You want to be tevel a machat, a needle of some kind that needs tefillah, something that you use, a skewer that you use for your shish kebabs. You want to be tevel a little skewer. How much water do you need? You only need, if you're using mei mayon, if you're teveling it in flowing water, you only need the amount of water necessary to cover the item that you're trying to be tevel. And tevilas kelim is a din daraisa. If that's the halacha by tevilas kelim, certainly we can be makel by netilas yadayim or tevilas yadayim, which is a din derabanan. Now continues the Mechaber, and now he goes on to the case of somebody who wants to dunk his hands not in mei mayon, not in flowing water, but in standing gathered water. He wants to dunk his hands in what we would call a mikveh. Says the Mechaber, Vim hitbilam b'mei mikveh. If you're being tevel your hands in the waters of a mikveh. Now, when I say that you're being tevel your hands in the water of a mikveh, it sounds like you're going to the mikveh, right? You're going to the mikveh, meaning a building with something that looks like a miniature swimming pool inside, and you're going to dunk your hands in there. No, that's not exactly, it could be that too, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Pei Aleph, b'mei mikveh. What does mei mikveh mean? It means, says the Mishnah Berurah, she'enam noivin. Here we're talking about natural water, but it's not flowing. It's standing water. Let's say you have rainwater that was collected into one standing pool, or you have sharas shlagim, or you have melted snow. You have runoff from melted snow, and it gathered in a pool. So this is very easy to understand. There was a storm. You go outside, and there's a ditch, and the ditch is full of rainwater. That's not noivin. It's not flowing, so it's not mei mayon. If you would have, let's say, a drainage ditch, or more accurately, some kind of a drainage canal where the rainwater runs, let's say, off the road, and it goes into a ditch on the side of the road, and it doesn't sit there, it flows. The ditch has a pitch. Say that 10 times fast. And the water flows to some distant area, either where it goes into a drain, I don't know. But now it's mei geshamim, it's rainwater, but it's not mei mikvah, it's not standing, it's zoichelin, it's flowing water. That would be more like the mei mayon. Over here we're not talking about mei mayon. Over here I'm talking about mei mikvah. Mei mikvah is you've just got a ditch, it rained, the water collected in a ditch, and it's sitting there. That's what we're talking about now with mei mikvah. So says the Mechaber, again, top line here, Nun Beis Amud Aleph, Vim hitbilam b'mei mikvah, if you dunk your hands into the waters of standing water, mei mikvah, yesh omrim shedinoi kemayon, there are those that say that it has the same halacha as a mayon. You don't need 40 sa, you just need the amount of water that can cover both of your hands at one time. However, there are others that say that you need the minimum share of a mikvah for your whole body, which is arba misah. The Mechaber says that we could go like the Mokuladik opinion, and we could rely for tevilas yadayim on dunking your hands in the waters of a mikvah, of standing water, as long as there's enough water to cover both hands at the same time. However, the Ramah says, V'yesh lahachmer lechatchila. Lechatchila, we should be machmir, not to try to accomplish tevilas yadayim in waters of a mikvah, unless there's 40 sa. Says the Mishnah Berurah. First, let's do Pei Aleph again, because we didn't read the entire Mishnah Berurah. Says the Chavetz Chaim b'mei mikvah. This means waters she'einam noivim, that are not flowing. Elo sheniskansu b'makom echad. It's gathered into one place, b'mei geshamim, either from rainwater, ayav sharas shlagim, or runoff from melting snow. However, if the water is very dirty, we will learn the halacha over there about dirty water when it comes to the netilas yadayim and tevilas yadayim. So here we are in a machlokes. You're trying to do tevilas yadayim in Mei Mikvah. Do you need arba misah or not? So the first opinion that the Mechaber brought down, he said, Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, and this is a Rabbeinu Yoina, and maybe a Rashba. I'm saying maybe, you'll see because of what the Chavetz Chaim says in the Bir Halacha, but definitely Rabbeinu Yoina says that the halacha of the Mei Mikveh is the same as the Mei Ma'ayon, that you don't need 40 sa, you just need enough water to cover your hands. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Cotton Pei Beis, Shadinoi Kamayan. What's the rationale for this opinion? The Midaraisa, because the truth is that Midaraisa, Af B'mayim B'chunosin, Sagilu Tfilas Kalim B'Revius. We said that the backing for the idea that you only need enough water to cover your hands, it comes from the Din Daraisa of Tfilas Kalim. By Tfilas Kalim, the halacha is that a mayon, if you're toveling kalim in flowing water, you only need the amount of water necessary to cover what it is that you're toveling. So you want to do the tevilas yadayim in a mayon, also you only need enough water to cover your hands. Now we're talking about a Mei Mikvah. Well, what's the halacha of tevilas kalim in Mei Mikvah? So the Mishnah Berurah says, really, midaraisa, the halacha is, if you're toveling kalim in a mikvah, in Mei Mikvah, in standing water, you also don't need arba misah. Really, when you're toveling kalim in standing water, it's the same halach as a mayon. All you need is enough water to cover the keli. So this opinion, the Rabbeinu Yoina says, look, if you're doing tevilas yadayim in Mei Mayon, you only need enough water to cover your hands, because tevilas kalim is okay in a mayon if you have enough water to cover what you're being tovel. Well, guess what? Midaraisa, the same halacha applies to a mikveh. If you want to tovel kalim in a mikveh, midaraisa, you only need enough water to cover the keli. So, tevilas yadayim is a drabanan. You're doing it in a mikveh. Rabbeinu Yoina says you only need enough water to cover your hands. The midaraisa af b'mayim b'chunosim sagilu tevilas kalim b'revius. You only need a revius. Imein kalim ktanim shemes kasin b'hamayim. For tevilas kalim midaraisa, you only need, if you're trying to be tovel a very tiny keli in a mikveh, you need a revius, as long as it could cover the keli that you're being tovel. For rak chachamim itzrichu behem arba misah kamay b'tevilas haguf. The chachamim said that by tevilas kalim in a mikveh, you need arba misah. You want to be tovel yourself, a person has to become tar, he goes to the mikveh, he needs arba misah. So the Chacham said kalim also. In the mikveh you need arba misah. Olinian netila derabanan, but by netilas yadayim it's a din derabanan. Lo yachmiru. The Rabbeinu Yoina says there's no reason to be machmer. That's the Rabbeinu Yoina. However, the second opinion that the Mechaber brought down, he said yesh oimrim shetzarech arba misah. But there are those that differ, and in the Bir Halacha we're going to see that that's really the vast majority of the Rishonim that say that no, you want to do tevilas yadayim in standing water, you need arba misah. Why? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the Sfir Lahu, because all of these Rishonim hold the kevan de bitlu rabbanon tefila b'pachas min arba misah b'mayim mechunasin, since Chazal were mevatel the idea of tvila in a mikveh of less than 4 amsah. Again, the only place where the only precedent that we have for tevilah in a mikveh of less than 4 amsah is tevilas kelim and daraisa. Tevilas kelim and daraisa, you tevilah a cup in a mikveh, midaraisa, you don't need 4 amsah. What do you need? You need at minimum a revius, and it has to be enough water to cover the keli that you're being tevel. So that's the precedent for being tevel in a mikveh less than 4 amsah. But Chazal said it doesn't work. Chazal said, midrabanan, you can't do that. You have to have at least 4 amsah. So the Chazal were mevatel, they did away with the only precedent that we had for tefillah in a mikveh less than 4 amsah. So therefore the Rishonim say, once Chazal did that, you can't do tevilas yadayim in a mikveh of less than 4 amsah either. Shuv ein by tevilah klal l'chol davar. Tevilah no longer works in a mikveh less than 40 sah for anything. And he brings this down from Tosfos. Now, the Mechaber said, v'naktinon k'divrei hamekel. The Mechaber said we could paskin like the first opinion, like the Eisharim that says that this does work. Says the Mishnah Berurah pei dalid the divrei seifrim hu, because we're dealing over here with the din derabanan, the tevilas yadayim. We could go l'kula. But the Ramah said v'yesh lahakmer lechatchila. Says the Mishnah Berurah pei hey aval b'di'evet, but b'di'evet, if you did this already, if you saw a puddle. You saw a puddle that has rainwater in it, and you wanted to wash for your tuna fish sandwich, so you dunked your hands into the puddle, and there was enough water in there that it could cover both of your hands at the same time. So b'di'eved, if you did this already, or you're stuck, you're in the park on Chalamayid, and you're stuck, you're trying to figure out how to wash, and this puddle is the only answer that you have, yesh lakel, you could be mekel. V'ayit bir halacha, and he sends us over here to the bir halacha. So if you take a look at the Bir Halacha Dibra Maschel V'yesh Lahachmer Lechatchila, the Chavetz Chaim says, "V'day, you should know, the be'emes Kol HaRishayim Sovereign Kain." All of the Rishonim hold like this first day, says the Chavetz Chaim. Hainu Rashi v'Rambam v'Mordechai Amuva beBeis Yosef v'chein Kasu beEshkol uBar Zarua Lehedya v'chein Muchach b'Rabbein Yeruchim v'chein Pasuk Marshal. All the Rishonim paskin like this first daya, this first opinion that's more machmer, and says you can't do tevilas yadayim in May Mikvah with less than 4 amsah. V'habeis Yosef shehevi dar Rashba sfir like Rabbeinu Yonah, and this that the Beis Yosef says that the Rashba is makel like the Rabbeinu Yonah lahakel hu b'chidushav. The Rashba says that in the chidusha Rashba, avo b'teres habayis ha'aruch, but in the Rashba's teres habayis. Kosav Karashi, he says like Rashi. Now you list that that's a steer in the Rashba. I'm a Chedusha Rabbi Kiva Eger. V'loy nimtza la'akel rak das Rabbeinu Yonah, and really the only one you could find is Mekel is the Rabbeinu Yonah. V'chein Kosav Haritva. V'alkein, and therefore Nira says the Chavetz Chaim, it would appear da'afta Mekel b'shas avchak yesh le'al mil ismaich. Even though somebody who's Mekel under pressing circumstances has a nail to hang his hat on, he could be Soimach on the Rashba, the Mechaber Hakel, because the Mechaber is not you found the Rashba, so you could be Mekel like the Rashba. No, because there is a Rashba, and the Mechaber says that we could be Mekel like the Rashba. The Mechaber Hakel, the Gmar Ramah, and even the Ramah who says that you should be Machmir, he says L'chatchila. The Gmar Ramah lo hechmir rak L'chatchila, v'chein kasva achroinim. Nevertheless, if after you go wash in this puddle, you get a keli and you get water to be able to wash properly, yitabali bracha, you should wash again, albeit without a bracha. Kevan the Roiva Rishonim Paislim was there. Achak Batosich Ke Kasav Elos Tamid. Chavetz Chaim says that later on he found that the Elos Tamid indeed writes this. V'ayin bebir agra the mashpagam kein deshita sa'oisrin pshita leitvei milosh arate sefta. Okay. Now we go to Sif Tezvav, 2 lines from the top end of the line. Says the Mechaber, Mei Geshabim Shehem Zoichalim. Okay, now let's say we talk about the drainage ditch that I spoke about earlier. Now you have rainwater, but it's flowing. So this is not rainwater that is mechunas, that gathered in a puddle. or in a ditch. This is rainwater that flowed off the road, and there's a drainage canal that runs someplace. So now it's mei geshamim that's zoichelin. It's flowing mei geshamim. So it's not mei mayon. Mei mayon is naturally flowing water. A natural stream, a natural creek, a river. That's mei mayon. Now, don't get me wrong, there is rainwater in the river as well. But the river is not rainwater. The river ultimately has a source. The creek, you have creeks that they get bigger and smaller depending on the amount of rainwater that there is. But you have a creek that has an underground source from somewhere. It's a spring. It's fed from a natural spring. So that's mei mayon. Here we're talking about mei geshamim, rainwater that's zoichelin. The drainage canal is always dry. Then when it rains, the rainwater runs off into the canal and it goes flowing away. So once it flows away and the rain stops, eventually it just dries out. So that's a mei geshamim zoichelin. That's what we're talking about here. Says the Mechaber, mei geshamim shem zoichelin, flowing rainwater, pirish, nimshachim v'holchim she'ena mechunasim. It's not gathered, it's flowing. V'yesh bahem arboim sa, and you have 40 sa, yesh lehistapek im tovel behem yadav. We have room for a suffix. We have room for a doubt whether you could use this water for tevilas yadayim at all. So again, what do you have here? You have mei geshamim. If it would be mei geshamim in a puddle, gathered in a puddle, not flowing. So over there we had a machlokes. We had a more chumradik opinion. He says you need arba masah. We have a more mekel opinion that says you don't need arba masah. Now we're talking about mei geshamim, but it's not gathered in a puddle. And it's not gathered in a ditch. It's flowing. Over here we have a suffix whether you could use it at all, even if there's arba masah. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cotton pevav. Shem zoichlin. Because generally, the general rule of mei geshamim is mei geshamim does not bring about tahara unless it's bechunasin, unless it's mei mikvah. Mayon water, spring water, is mitayr bezoichlin. That's mitayr when it's flowing. But mei geshamim does not bring about tahara when it's flowing. As a general rule, mei geshamim brings about tahara when it's bechunasim, when it's standing water in a mikvah. Ice cotton pezayin v'yesh b'hem, and over here you have 40 sa. So over here you have mei geshamim, which usually doesn't bring about tahara when it's zoichlin, but you also have 40 sa of mei geshamim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber wants to say is, afilu b'yesh b'hem arba sa. Even if there's 40 sa, yesh lehistapik in mahani l'tevilas yadayim. We have a suffix whether or not this works with tevilas yadayim. V'hainu, afilu lahamakilan le'el le'inyan mikveh b'she'ein arba misa. Even according to the more kuladika yesh oimrim of Sif Yodalad, who says that for a mikveh you don't need arba misa, efshir dahacha garatvei. But over here where it's rainwater that's flowing, it's even worse. And even if you have 40 sa, it won't work. The Hasam, because over there in Sif Yodalid, where we're talking about mei mikvah, we're talking about rainwater that's gathered rainwater in a ditch. Over there, al kalpanim min HaTorah loy be'ino l'tevilas kelim arba sa. Over there we have a precedent min HaTorah that rainwater should be able to bring about tahara with less than 40 sa. We have a precedent that mei geshamim gathered in a puddle that's not flowing could bring about tahara with less than 40 sa. Tevilas kelim midaraisa. So we have a very strong precedent for gathered mei geshamim bringing about tahara with less than 40 sa. And that's why we have a sheet in Sif Yodalad that holds that you could dunk your hands into a puddle of rainwater even if there's less than 40 sa, because of that precedent. But over here where we're talking about mei geshamim that zoichelin, flowing rainwater, vahacha min HaTorah pasol af l'tevilas kelim mei geshamim zoichelin. This would be possible in daraisa for tevilas kelim, even with 40 sa, because mei geshamim zoichelin don't bring about tahara. Di'ilu lahamachmirin le'el. Now, you want to talk about the more chamerdik Yeshayimrim in Sif Yodalid, who says that even in a puddle of standing water you need Arba Masa. V'savi debina dafka Arba Masa kamo b'tfilas kol haguf pshita d'zeichel loy mahani. Certainly that shita, the more chamerdik opinion of Sif Yodalid would certainly say that this can't work because there's absolutely no precedent for it to work. Therefore, if you did do this, you have to wash again, albeit without a bracha. Okay, Sif Tezayin, 4 lines off the top, Nun Beis Amud Aleph, says the Mechaber. Arbaim sa mayim she'uvim shebekarka. If you have 40 sa of mayim she'uvim, let's remember, mayim she'uvim, that's water that was drawn with a keli. So anytime you take water, even if it's made geshamim or natural spring water, you take a Home Depot bucket, you bring it over to the creek, and you fill up a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket with water. That water is now mayim she'uvim. So now, says the Mechaber, Arbaim sa mayim she'uvim. If you have 40 sa of mayim she'uvim shebekarka, and you pour it into a puddle in the ground. So you have a ditch. You have an empty ditch. And this ditch is big enough to hold 40 sa of water. So you say, I'll make a mikveh. You take your Home Depot bucket and you go 8 times to the creek and you fill it up and you pour it out into the ditch. Well, I said 8 times. That's gallons. That would be 40 gallons, not 40 sa. So you take your bucket, you fill it up from the creek, and you pour it into the ditch until you have 40 sa in the ditch. So now you have 40 sa of mayim michunasim. You have 40 sa of gathered water, but all of that water is mayim she'uvim because you drew it with a bucket. So Arbam sa mayim she'uvim shabakarka, says the Mechaber, laharambam ein matbilin behen mas yadayim. According to the Rambam, you cannot use this water for tevilas yadayim, or laharayvid, but according to the Ravid, matbilin, you can. What's at play over here? Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cut and pay test. You have 40 sa of mayim she'uvim shebekarka, and you poured it into a ditch in the ground. Avo bekliya mechuberes lekarka. Let's say you didn't pour it into a depression in the ground. Instead, you poured it into a keli that's attached to the ground. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ein ba tefila l'kuli alma. Everybody would agree that you can't do tevilas kelim, dein tovlim bekelim, because we learned already in Sifches, you're not allowed to be tovel in a keli. Vayin le'el Sifches. Indeed, he sends us back to Sifches. You can't go ahead and do tevilah in a keli. Ice cotton tzaddik. So you poured this mayim she'uvim into a depression in the ground. So the Mechaber told us that according to the Rambam, ein matbilin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why? To be in on mayim aksherim l'tfilas haguf, because we already learned this rule earlier, and that is that the water that you're going to use for tevilas yadayim has to be water that's kosher for tevilas haguf. It has to be water that would be kosher for toveling your whole body and bringing tara onto your own body. And mayim she'uvim is not kosher for a mikveh. V'tama Ravid, and the Ravid who says that you can do this is Mishum dematzino le'inyan tevilas balei karyan l'divrei Torah shet tevilasan midrabanan. A balkari, somebody who experiences a seminal emission, a balkari really takanas Ezra. Takanas Ezra was that a balkari is aser b'divrei Torah. Now we don't paskin like that nowadays, but back in the day, tevilas Ezra was a takana that a balkari is aser in divrei Torah. In order to be mutter once again in divrei Torah, he has to go to the mikveh. Now that is only a tevilah d'Rabbanan, and for that, arbaim sa of mayim she'uvim in a depression in the karka would work. So here we have a precedent, says the Ravid, for tevilah in arbaim sa of mayim she'uvim in the karka for something that's only necessary d'Rabbanan. So okay, that would seem to be a good precedent for tevilas yadayim, which is also a d'Rabbanan. So again, v'tam ha'rayvedu mishum demetzino le'inyan tevilas balei karyan l'divrei Torah, we find in the context of the halacha of tevilah for a balkari, so that he should become mutter in divrei Torah, shetfilas midrabanan, which is only a tefillah, which is a tefillah that's only necessary midrabanan. The mutter b'sheuvin shebekarka, that's mutter in 40 sav ma'im sheuvim in the karka. Kedalael b'simin perches bebeis Yosef. Okay, now let's go weiter in the Mechaber. Now says the Mechaber in the middle of Sifteh Zayin, U'she'uva shehem shichu kula gam lo harambam matpilim behem yadayim. If you have mayim she'uvim that you did hamshacha on, and we learned about this earlier on in this Siman, what's hamshacha? You take your 5 gallons of mayim she'uvim and you pour the bucket on the ground, and you let the water flow over the ground for a minimum of 3 tfachim, and then flow into the ditch. So now the water had hamshacha, it flowed on the ground before it went into the ditch and became 40 sa of mayim mechunasim shebekarka. That takes away the status of mayim she'uvim, and now it would be kosher even according to the Rambam. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Sadik Aleph Shem Shichu Kula. Says the Chafetz Chaim, there's a hidden chiddush over here. What does he mean Shem Shichu Kula? You did hamshach on all the water. It's an alarmer. Da'afim oisa kula she'uvin. Even if all 40 sa were mayim she'uvin, rak shehimshech esamayim derech akarka l'makam acher, and just you did hamshacha on all of this mayim she'uvim to bring it to this ditch, kosher bazev v'chanal b'siv zayin. Okay. Says the Mechaber Sif Yud Zayin, Lo yital mehanohar mayim biyadai achas. You cannot scoop up water from the river with one hand, v'yiten al yadai ashenis, and pour it onto your second hand in order to accomplish netilas yadayim. Levisha ein kad loy netila v'loy tvila. Because in this case, you accomplished neither netilas yadayim. Netilas yadayim requires a keli. Your scooped hand is not a keli. So you didn't accomplish netilas yadayim, nor did you accomplish tevilas yadayim. Even though you have a nahar and you're using river water, you didn't immerse your hand. You tried to accomplish it by pouring water on the hand from the other hand. So you accomplished neither netilas yadayim nor tevilas yadayim, and therefore this is not efficacious. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Sadik Beis, Loy netila, you didn't accomplish netila, the netila mekli beinan. For netilas yadayim you need a keli. You didn't use a kli. And you didn't accomplish tevilas yadayim because it might be river water, but you didn't immerse your hands in the water. Sif Yud Ches, 4 lines off the bottom. Yadai achas b'netila. Let's say you did netilas yadayim with a keli on one hand, the yadai achas b'tefila, and the other hand you did tevilas yadayim. So you're in the park and you want to wash for your 2 different sandwich. And you were smart. You brought a keli with you. You go over to the river, you fill up the keli, and you pour netilas yadayim. You do it absolutely ka'alacha on your right hand, and then a hawk comes and grabs your netilas yadayim cup and flies away. So now your right hand had netilas yadayim, your left hand is still stam yadayim, it's still tamei. What do? Well, you're by the river. Dunk your hand in the river. So now one hand you did netilas yadayim, on the other hand you did tevilas yadayim. Says the Mechaber, that's fine. Yadav tahiros, your hands are tahor. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tzadik Gimel Benetila Pirish Shenoto Yadai Achas B'Kli Kadin. You washed one hand from a keli mamish kalacha, vashni taval banahara b'mikvah, and the second hand you dunked either into a river, right? So that's mei mayan. You don't even need 40 sa, or into mei mikvah, or into a puddle that was holding our bam sa. Or linyan bracha. Now, what kind of bracha do you make? Says the Mishnah Berurah, linyan bracha mevark bazeh al netilas yadayim. The bracha that you're going to make is the regular bracha asher kedishanu b'mitzvayis of tzivanu al netilas yadayim. Af l'das Ramah, come on. And this is true even according to the Ramah, who's going to tell us that when you do tevilas yadayim, there is a bracha asher kedishanu b'mitzvayis of tzivanu al tevilas yadayim. That's if you dunk both hands. Now we're going to see we don't paskin that way. But the Ramah is going to suggest such a bracha. If you do tevilas yadayim on both hands, you make a bracha al tevilas yadayim. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, if you do netila on one hand and tevilah on the other hand, then even according to the Ramah, the bracha that you make is al netilas yadayim. So after das Ramah come on, since on one hand at least you did netilas yadayim, you make the bracha of al netilas yadayim. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sifyot Tes. Again, Gmar Chasimah Tova, the learning should stand as a schus for Shaleba for Meir ben Chayesara. In the schus of limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu should send Yeshua Sefuris Panas Shetuchim to all those in need. Gmar Chasimah Tova to one and all. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Be well.